Ahoy, adventurers! Your old buddy Hambone is back with another code from our friends over at Noble Knight Games. This code is good from March 16th to April 11th, and it is called Spring Fun. That's SPRINGFUN Fun. Now, this code is good for 5% off your order, any order $25 or more, and that is good in store or online. So if you are lucky enough to be able to walk through those glorious doors of Noble Knight Games, you can get your discount using the code SPRINGFUN. Or if you're like me and you're ordering from a distance in the Garden State of New Jersey, SpringFun's the one you're going to want to put in at checkout. Get 5% off your orders of $25 or more, and it's a long code. So if you're hearing this episode later, don't you worry. This code is good from March 16th all the way to April the 11th. So use the code SPRINGFUN and have some fun playing games that you get from our friends over at Noble Knight.
This is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse, hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me today is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He once made a wrong turn on his way to Albuquerque, Stu Horvath.
I like that. That's a deep one.
Yeah, it's a deep one, right?
It's subtle.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's nuanced. How are we doing today, Stu?
I'm doing pretty good.
So, Stu, what's on the menu for tonight?
Bunnies and Burrows. Good old B&B.
Okay. I've never heard of this.
So, this game is from 1976. This is one of the first not D&D role-playing games.
Wow.
So, first wave of people who were just like, holy crap, D&D came out, blew my mind, I'm going to make a game. It's like Tunnels and Trolls, Arduin, and Bunnies and Burrows.
It seems like a weird pivot from Dungeons and Dragons.
It's super strange. And well, I mean, obviously it's about being rabbits. You play rabbits. And it's not like you're playing superpowered rabbits or anything. It's like Watership Down, the role-playing game.
My God.
Yeah, and sort of, maybe. Yeah, you do kind of have skill sets and stuff. There's a skill system. It's the first game that actually kind of has a rudimentary skill system. It has a really deep martial arts system.
Wait.
I know!
Karate bunnies?
They call it Bun Fu.
Oh, baby, that's a little on the nose.
It was 76.
I know.
You know?
Hey, look, everyone was kung fu fighting in the cinema in 1976, I guess.
So, yeah, it's just this really strange swerve, I think. The game was by B. Dennis Suster and Scott Robinson. And, they just came out swinging for the weird, you know?
Clearly.
It's a fairly popular game. People are still playing the first edition as late as 2008. You can find people on message boards talking about it.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, you know what? You like what you like.
Yeah. So the one I have in my hand is the second edition that came out in 81. And there was a subsequent third edition. Steve Jackson Games finally put a version of it out using the GURPS system. So there's
Okay.
GURPS, Burrows, and Bunnies. And they just kickstarted a new edition.
Okay, really? In 2020?
2019.
Okay.
I think it's Frog God Games, our friends at Frog God Games.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it has a long pedigree, and it's a game about bunnies.
I see games like this, and I think to myself, man, I never, thought a game like this existed. But listen, at this point in the Vintage RPG Podcast history, we've seen some weirder stuff. And that said, when I see stuff like this come up, I think to myself, God, I wish I could just get paid to play every game. Because this is something that it's piqued my interest. It's such a weird sounding game, and I'm never going to get to play it.
No, we're never going to have time. We're never going to have time to play Burrows and Bunnies. Bunnies and Burrows. I keep messing it up. I should just say B&B, huh?
Yeah, you know.
B&B.
I just say B&B.
B&B.
Feels good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a bed and breakfast, except it's with kung fu fighting bunnies.
The nice thing about the second edition is that you have some Jeff D illustrations. He does the cover and a couple of interiors. A lot of the original illustrations, if you take a gander at that, Hambo, they're very sketchy and not very good.
I'm gandering. Yeah.
But the interesting thing about them is that although this is supposedly inspired by Watership Down...
Is that a crossword puzzle?
No.
Oh, no, it's a stat block.
No, it's not even that. It's like one of the defense class strength level kind of cross-reference charts.
Oh, boy.
It's a super old school game. You remember, it's 76, so all of this stuff is like super simulation oriented and like complicated with charts.
They're not even wacko for Thacko at this point.
No. But right next to that chart, you have a picture of a bunny with a spear and goggles on. So I'm not sure how Watership Down it is.
Yeah.
What's cool is that there's like several classes and each class has its own specialization. So like you have like an herbalist bunny and like the fighting bunny. And you're giving me such a strange look.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around getting at a table and playing this. I mean, it sounds great because it sounds like with different classes and specializations, everyone in the party gets to do the thing that's their thing.
Yeah, and each class is based on your main attribute. So like the intelligence attribute is like the trapster kind of buddy. So you get to build snares and stuff.
So you're like a rogue.
Sorta, kinda. Yeah, I guess. It's strange, though, because they're bunnies.
Yeah.
And so, huge contrast between D&D and this is that, you're bunnies. Despite the fact that there's a very intricate martial arts system called Bun Fu.
Of course.
You're still bunnies. If you come up against a fox, you're going to get your ass kicked.
Yeah.
And you're going to get eat.
Yeah.
Or et. You're going to get et. And,
yeah.
So right away, I think it's super interesting that, 2 years after D&D comes out, there's already a system that's just like trying to move dramatically away from the murder hobo thing that's sort of really built into D&D. From the very beginning, it's a very tactical combat-oriented game. Everything's keyed towards combat. And this is a game that is just like, no, you have to figure out clever ways to avoid combat, and it encourages role-playing. So like all the way back in 76.
That's pretty neat. Because normally it takes a little while longer for the apple to fall from the tree before someone says, nope, don't like it.
Yeah, like because people usually are enamored of the new thing and they want to enjoy it for a while. And then you have to build a sort of dissatisfaction with that thing before you're just like, okay, let's get weird.
Well, yeah. And also remember, 1976, it is not as widely known and loved. It's not mainstream at that point. So it's not like, when you're in a band and you see this other band, you're like, that band stinks, because you hear them on the radio and you're like, I could do a better job than that. I'm going to write a better song. I'm just going to do it. And you can go and you can do something like that. Like if you weren't in the know about Dungeons and Dragons, then you don't know. You're just kind of like, oh, it's something I've heard about, like maybe from a few friends, but like this is like, well, we want to do something completely different than Dungeons and Dragons, so we're going to write a role-playing game about bunnies.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You got to keep in mind that in 74, the original run of the box set was what, a couple hundred boxes?
Yeah.
100 boxes maybe of the wood grain box set, and there's probably, maybe 1,000, 2,000 out there at this point. Like it's a very small group of people who are playing these sorts of games and decentralized. So like it's the fact that this went weird so quickly is like so fascinating to me.
And it's a book, so you can tell it was probably run off on a runoff press. Like it's not like
totally. No, this has pretty good typesetting. It's not typewritten, which is something that you see a lot of in the early stuff. It's just like typewritten and photocopied like a zine. Also, this is the second edition that came out in 81, so I'm not sure how the original looked.
Okay.
That could have been typewritten, but still.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It's like the old story you told me about how like Greg Stafford ended up buying the first box of D&D because he just happened to be there when it was like in the moment.
Yeah, at the print shop or whatever. Yeah. But this is a game that is very similar to D&D. It's its own complete system, which I think is also interesting. A lot of the people the initial imitators, were basically doing what we call hacking of D&D. So like Tunnels and Trolls, Arduin basically initially rips off D&D, right? Like it's just this idea of, well, they did it and you can't copyright a rule set, so we're just going to do it too and put out the same basic thing. This is a ground up different system.
It looks like it.
But it is still of that mindset. It's still coming out of the wargaming scene. It still has that simulation, lots of charts trying to like use math to simulate reality. I think you could really make the argument that this is the start of the strange side of role-playing games that kind of contributes to the idea of like a Call of Cthulhu and games that are off the path set forth by Dungeons & Dragons and sort of eventually leads to the story games that we have now that are just super weird, rules light, collaborative storytelling things. Like, this isn't the first story game.
Okay.
But I think that, like, you don't get to the point where you're a bunch of people and you're like, we should have story games without something like Bunnies and Burrows doing what it did when it did.
I mean, just imagine the pitch, and imagine like the sell of your friends for D&D. Like at that point back in the day, it's like you're probably used to playing board games, or maybe like what rudimentary style miniature war games that you may be used to. But the idea of you're going to do a dungeon crawl to a person who may not be fully in that scene or a part of that world yet. Like I can imagine how hard the pitch would be to really get the idea of playing D&D over with your friends. And then I look at Bunnies and Burrows and I go, man, whoever pitched this to their group of friends to be like, hey, so there is that sword and sorcery game over there. Over here, we're going to play a game about bunnies. Like that's the greatest salesman ever walked face the earth. That's probably Billy Mays' first sale.
The crazy thing, too, is you got to remember that this is 76. Watership Down, the movie, hasn't come out yet.
Oh.
You're just inspired by the book at this point.
Jeez.
So you've not even been horrified by the cartoon. Like everybody who's seen Watership Down's been traumatized by it. Absolutely.
Severely.
Like I had nightmares for weeks after that. Just couldn't handle it.
It's on the short list of movies that you don't want to show your kid.
Yeah.
But you do because you're like, you need to experience what I experienced.
Yeah, like you have to wear the scars that I have.
Yeah. But then you weigh it against like the impending therapy bill. So
yeah. So like I could kind of understand why like in 81 that there's an interest in Bunnies and Burrows, but in 76 it's so out there to me. And Watership Down was a huge book, but like I don't know, how many books do we read as a group that we're jazzed about and want to make a role-playing game out of?
Not enough.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. And I think that Bunnies and Burrows is like the best example of how Wild West and no rules it was in the 70s in the role-playing game industry or whatever you call it, clique, niche.
It was more of a clique and a niche than anything else.
Yeah.
And that's cool, man. That's Wild West punk rock days.
Yeah. And now there's millions of people playing these games.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And people still play Bunnies and Burrows. I kind of want to play. Can we play?
All right, we can play. We're just going to put one of the other pieces of kindling on the back burner.
Yeah. So all the other games. Yeah, and honestly, I just like something like this. I feel like we don't even have to really play. We just need to make the characters. Mouse Guard was fun.
Mouse Guard was great. Yeah.
There's not really a huge leap from this to Mouse Guard, I don't think.
Well, I mean, this is the precursor to Mouse Guard.
Yeah.
And stuff like this. I mean, there wouldn't probably be a Mouse Guard if it wasn't for a thing like Bunnies and Burrows.
Sure. Yeah. That's the thing. There is a story game called The Warren, which they're bunnies. There's no spears and goggles in that game. It's like you're just bunnies. And it's a modern story game. And when I posted about it, people were just like, yeah, well, I already played Bunnies and Burrows. Like, I don't need another rabbit role-playing game. It was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
These things are two completely different sorts of games.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. We can have Bunnies and Burrows and The Warren, and we can have a multitude of bunny games.
I agree. And at the same time, I feel like if you've got Bunnies and Burrows, you've already checked that box.
I don't know. Like, it's like a different approach. But like, if you say that you can't have The Warren, you're really one step away from saying you can't have Mouse Guard. I really like Mouse Guard.
I did. Agree. Yeah, I walk it back.
There's something in general about being an animal that kind of weirds me out, which contributes to my like, this is so odd.
Is it a lack of opposable thumbs?
Yeah, like I just don't know how to deal. Like I don't know how to put myself in that space. If you make the main characters animals, it's odd to me. Like what's the Sherlock Holmes mouse movie?
Oh, yeah, the Mouse Detectives.
Yeah, it's like just make a detective movie. Why do they have to be mice?
I don't know, they're really cute.
Yeah, and I mean I like DuckTales. DuckTales is good. But like, yeah, I don't know.
I understand because there are certain fantasy races that I just can't wrap my head around. Like, say, a Dragonborn or something.
Yeah.
Then you're just like, I've played a Dragonborn. I've enjoyed playing a Dragonborn. But as far as, like, RPGing a Dragonborn, like, my base instinct is like, you're a dragon. Like, what would a dragon do? And you're just, trying to put your head in the mind of a dragon. So I think a bunny might be a little tougher.
Yeah. The Redwall books are another one where it's just, and I read those books. I loved the first 3 or 4 of those books. They were great books. But like at the end of my run with those books, I was just sort of like, well, why do they have to be animals? But then at the same time, it's kind of cool that they're animals because it's like a shorthand.
Yeah.
For like their character traits. And that sort of carries true. Like one of the cool things about Bunnies and Burrows is that there's no overhead. The barrier to entry is lower, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
Like, I don't know how a fireball looks like or feels like or like what those words sound like, because I don't live in a world with magic.
Right.
But I live in a world, I've seen a fox.
Yeah. I've definitely been bit by one of my girlfriend's bunnies.
There you go.
Hurt.
As much as I think that it would be hard to play a bunny, like situationally, you see a fox, you could run, you know?
Run real fast.
Yeah.
Because if the bunny bite sucked, you could only imagine the fox would be worse.
Yeah, which is...
And rabid.
And that's sort of similar to Call of Cthulhu, right? There was a lot more just immersion in the role-playing because it was a world that we know. You know,
right.
Like, how are we going to get there? We're going to use a car. Easy. Like, I don't have to have a horse. Like, we don't need to worry about teleportation spells. None of that stuff. It's just like, well, we got to... Okay, yeah, we got luggage. That kind of sucks. But, you know...
Yeah. Oh, my God. We had so much luggage. And we had to hide it all the time.
Oh, yeah, because those cultists would come for it.
Every time.
They knew.
Yeah.
Because I knew.
Well, yeah, because you're the keeper of secrets.
Keeper of secrets.
All right, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on Bunnies and Burrows?
It's cool. I think that it's just a really interesting part of RPG history. I think that just the idea that there is a role-playing game about rabbits from 1976.
Gosh, RPGs are cool.
Like, yeah. I think everybody should check out the Frog God Games version because it's new, it's fresh, it's updated, it's streamlined. And if you want to play a game about bunnies, that's the best bet for you.
All right. So this was another episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can the people find you?
They can find me at Vintage RPG on Instagram every day, posted about stuff like Bunnies and Burrows, having my mind blown periodically by, what is this?
Very cool. You can find me on Twitter at Handbreaker. I tweet about cute animals. I tweet about Dungeons & Dragons. I tweet about professional wrestling. You can follow my day-to-day adventures in podcasting and in life on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. And if you're looking for another fun podcast to check out my podcast, My Thai Happy Hour. It's pop culture for weirdos, wherever podcasts are found. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.